Hello, everyone. This is JC Kay, and this is quantumtruthsjckay. Kay. I am absolutely thrilled to bits to have my next guest, and you may have seen him already because I've shared a lot of his videos on my channel. And this is the wonderful Jerry Marzinsky. And Jerry is a psychotherapist, a retired psychotherapist for 35 years. And you've worked all over the place, Jerry. I mean, I see you everywhere now, and I guess the stuff that you have to say, you're able to say it because you are retired, right?
Well, I have a private practice now that I'm doing that, but I dropped my license because I knew they would come after me. You know, I couldn't tell the truth and have them not come after me. So I just let it expire so they can't go, oh, well, we pulled his license because he's saying this and saying that, and we don't like it, so we're going to revoke it. So, well, during my work years when I needed it to work in the emergency room and I needed it to work in the mental health centers and the psych hospitals, I maintained it. But once I got out, I didn't want to be under their thumb anymore. You know, I was tired of it.
Yeah, we're all breaking away from these systems that are failing us, aren't we? And this is what I love about you. And, I've watched probably nearly every interview you've done. And I remember quite a few years ago, I didn't realize it was you, but I'd heard Robert Stanley's podcast. And at the time, he was calling you Dr. J. And you were like this anonymous, you were not a doctor, you're a psychotherapist, but,
right.
and you were like this anonymous kind of whistleblower, but because you were still working in the industry. And then I realized it was you when I saw someone shared your video on one of my chats, and it was with James Delingpole. And then I saw it, and then I recognized the voice, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's Dr. J." So, and since then I've just been sharing you everywhere. And for those of you who haven't seen Jerry Marzinsky, I will share his links below. But Jerry is pretty much a maverick, aren't you? Because what I heard you say in one of the interviews was that your upbringing kind of made you mistrust authority. And this was why you were pushing the boundaries and questioning the whole psychiatric system, and especially patients who were suffering from schizophrenia in particular. Is that correct?
Well, my mistrust for authority was, it was inbred in me through my dad. I don't think he ever kept the promise to me that he made. Yeah. And then with when I was in the Boy Scouts, this was the second big one. Yeah. Where, I had the Scoutmaster. He's a great Scoutmaster otherwise, but he conspired with my dad as I was approaching one of the higher ranks in Scouts. Oh. And conspired with my dad. I met all the things, including memorizing the entire Morse code.
Wow.
To get to this rank. And then my dad said, well, he doesn't go to church, but neither did my dad. So all of a sudden I find, I go up before the board, the Scout board, and they said, well, we're not going to advance you to the higher rank because you're not reverent enough. You don't go to church. Yeah. So I said, okay, how long do I have to go to church for? And he said, 6 months. And I said, okay, 6 months. So I went to the nearest church, where I could go to. And I remember building this ark, going to Sunday school, not learning a whole lot, and watching the preacher have an affair with one of his congregation, and even as a teenager, I knew what was going on. And, I went, okay, I jumped through that hoop. I did my 6 months. And then the Scoutmaster contacted the preacher and said, well, did he come every week for 6 months? And he goes, well, yeah, he was here, but he didn't set the world on fire, And then when I went up before the board again for that next route, they went, well, we talked to it was really the Scoutmaster. He said, I talked to your preacher. He said, you really didn't set the world on fire in there. You got to go to another 6 months. Oh. And I looked at him and I said, screw you, buddy. I'm out. I quit. And I quit the scouts and said, take it and shove it. I quit. So that was like the second big one, where, you really can't trust authority. And then,
and in a way, it's a blessing, right? Because it's led to who you are.
You could see how it was shaping me,
yeah.
And I didn't much like it at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun at the time. So, you got that, and then you got the scouts, and then I went. My dad always looked at college professors like gods.
Yes.
And that's the impression I got. They were like gods, and.
Well, I love this.
Probably should.
I mean, I love this story because, here I am rooting for you all the way when I'm listening to you talking about how you questioned authority all the way through, university. And then when you get into work, can you just tell us, give the audience a bit of a background? Most of them know who you are. However, just give them a bit of a background of what you studied, where you were placed for most of your jobs, and then what you started to witness as we're looking at a lot of the mental health patients.
Well, that's a big order.
Well, just give us why are you here, Jerry? Just tell us why you're here.
Well, I don't know. I must have been drunk when I signed up for this, I guess. So, when I first started college, as soon as I hit abnormal psychology, that was the first thing that I hit that I really was fascinated with. And I don't know why, it just grabbed my attention. It's like, what's going on with these people? And I read through the book, and I've read through the DSM, and it was like, okay, this is what these disorders look like, but they didn't have anything about what to do about them. Nothing. It was like, okay, what is this? And they used this DSM that was put together by psychiatry as a Bible, both psychiatry and psychology.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was just like a Bible. I mean, it's like everything centered around this group of, I think it's 295, 293
and
different.
Growing. Yeah.
And growing psychiatric illnesses. So when I got into the PhD program, that was the Bible.
And nobody
it was
questioned
like nobody questioned it. They had classes on it. You had to memorize these groupings. You had to pile them in your head. And there's like almost 300 of these things.
So this is the diagnostic. Yeah, this is the diagnostic.
This is a diagnostic classification manual. I didn't find out later until it was all a work of fiction.
Yeah.
They made all those things up, every single one of them.
Wow.
And one of the psychologists or psychiatrists who was in one of these meetings said it was like a tobacco auction where, the guy comes in, a psychiatrist comes in, he goes, I got a new mental illness. It's da-da-da-da, and this is what I call it, and these are all the symptoms. And, if the rest of them kind of think about it and they've seen that in their practices, oh yeah, I could go with that. And they voted in.
Wow.
And then they give it an official title, and then they give it a diagnostic label and number, and then they put all these traits down there, and type 1, type 2.
Is this fueled by the pharmaceutical industry or?
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah,
fueled
Big Pharma is 100% behind this. They need that diagnostic classification thing and the number. To charge the insurance companies.
Insurance companies, yeah.
Insurance companies. So
what do you say? What do you say now? Having this, I mean, knowing this truth, and you're working in this industry, and what do you say to when you see a patient and their file says this person has borderline personality disorder and complex depression and other sorts of symptoms that the diagnostic manual has? How do you then approach that, knowing that could be anything, a number of traumas?
Well, there's usually traumas behind almost all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, virtually everything is a result of some kind of trauma. It's either sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. I mean, and that trauma stays there. It gets stuck there, and it stays in the subconscious. And recently they're coming out with their base energy method. I've been using it and studying it for over a year now. It gets into trauma and pulls it out quicker than anything I've ever seen. It just dissolves it right there within an hour. The traumas that have ruled this person's life have dissipated in an hour or two.
So this is called the MACE method, right? And
the MACE, we'll
probably jumping the gun here because we want to get to the juicy bits there.
Okay, we'll go back. But it was developed in Australia.
Yes, I did want to talk to the lady who is practicing it. I know she didn't develop the MACE method, but one of the ladies that you've had on some of your interviews.
Right.
But
Cherie Hatfield, I think she might be in there
South
with
Australia,
you.
I think, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. We'll have to look.
So where were we before I got off? Oh, we're talking to DSM. It's fabricated. So when I look at one of those diagnostic titles, I know the general category of behavior that I'll be dealing with. So it tells me, okay, this is what I can expect out of this guy, this class of behaviors.
Yes.
But there's no black and white. There, one bleeds into the other. Sometimes they're mixed up. I mean, and they make it look like distinct categories that, if they got this, I got. If you put a group of psychiatrists in a room and you give them a bunch of behavioral symptoms and ask them to diagnose them, very seldom will they come up with the same diagnosis.
No, exactly. And I've seen that too. So people often say, I think so-and-so that I know has this condition. And then when you're listening, you're like, well, that kind of fits in with narcissism and that kind of fits in with, this other condition. So that, I understand completely that they kind of bleed into each other. Now, I'm from a psychic background, sort of like spiritual work, doing spiritual healing and psychic work. And I'm always dealing with unseen realms. And I know that this reality is a multidimensional reality. And the more we are all awakening, I mean, the last 3 years has made us completely wake up that this whole reality is, it's kind of locked down into this kind of parasitic realm. We're seeing us psychics and mediums, we're seeing that there is something else at play here that's bigger than the humans.
Yeah,
and
things are changing fast.
Yeah, and you're seeing this yourself, and you've seen this for, 35 years into your work. When did you start seeing that there was something else up that was not what the textbooks were saying when you're working with your patients?
That was when I first got hold of a psychiatric population. So you look at what they're doing.
Yeah.
In my whole entire career, working in numerous psych hospitals, mental health centers, the prisons with the criminally insane there, I had never, ever seen a single researcher in any of those facilities. None.
Wow.
None. Zero. And even if they wanted to get in, they wouldn't be let in. They'd be told, it's too dangerous in here. We can't let you in. We got insurance stuff. If you get hurt, we'll get sued. They make it look like, if you walk in there and you say the wrong thing, you're going to die.
Wow.
They don't want people to know what's going on. Psych hospitals and prisons are like these mysterious buildings that you pass by and you wonder, what's going on in there? I did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I go by a mental hospital. I wonder what's in there. And the prisons. I wonder what's it like in there. And I remember when I first got to Central State. This was in Milledgeville, Georgia, the biggest psych hospital in the world at the time. I think there were close to 10,000 patients in there when I first got there. So for somebody who was interested in abnormal psychology, that was a candy store. I was like, wow, a sea of insanity all around me, and I get to look at it all, and nobody's going to stop me. And I remember, one of the first nights I was walking around there was at night. Milledgeville at that time was just a small town. It didn't even have a McDonald's. It didn't even have a shopping center. It just had a little, like these
That's
little
unheard of for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing there. If you wanted to get a hamburger, you had to drive into Macon, 30 miles away.
Wow.
So so we'd all jump in the car and go, yeah, we're going to go have a big hot time out tonight, and we're going to go to Crystal Hamburger in Macon. There was a bunch of the staff there. So it was like this island of insanity in the middle of Georgia.
Wow.
And there were like over 200 buildings there. It was on thousands of acres of land. Wow. It was like a small city in itself. It was this city of insanity. I remember when I first got there, I was walking under one of the psychiatric units. It was in summer and at night, and you could hear these howls just disappear into the night from the windows. Just this shrieking and these howls and this screaming coming out of these big, dark brick buildings.
Wow. Was this in the 80s or 90s? When
this was in the 80s.
Okay. So
I forgot when I first got there. I think it was
this is around the time
either late 70s or early 80s.
And they were still right. Okay, so they were definitely still doing shock treatment. I mean, they still do shock treatment.
Oh yeah, I saw one. Yeah, but I saw one of the original ones, and man, I almost fainted, and I got a strong stomach.
Wow.
But I can tell you about that if you want. But I remember this image is still stuck in my mind as I was walking under one of these psychiatric units at night by myself, and I look up in the window, and here's this shadow of this skinny lady just standing in the window, just staring at me. And I stopped, and I was staring at her, and I was kind of going, I wonder what's going on in her head. And we just sat there, and she stared at me, and I stared at her, and then I finally turned around and walked away. But it was one of the first images I had of the psych hospital. The second one is while I was doing an internship there. I was on my motorcycle coming in from the University of Georgia. Mm-hmm. So it was like a 30-mile drive, I think, to this hospital on the bike. And I was at the major intersection in the hospital, and sitting there at idle on a red light. And here's this skinny, naked guy comes running out of nowhere and runs across the intersection and disappears off into the grass there. And I'm going, well, what should I do? Should I go catch him? I could catch him for them on the motorcycle quick. I mean, I can be on him in no time. And then I'm thinking, well, what are you going to do with him if you do catch him?
So you let him go.
Yeah, I said, I think I'll let that one fly.
So how did you, so, I mean, we've heard a lot of your stories, but the reason why I brought you on is because here you are, this professional who's been working for nearly four decades, and you are saying what a lot of the people in my audience, the people who are the energy workers, the healers, the psychics, the mediums, and what we're seeing in our clients is that that many of them are affected by entities, and you're calling them voices, right? And in particular with paranoid schizophrenia, you're seeing these cases. And could you tell us some sort of the development of this realization in you? You're in a prison system or a psych ward, and you're adding the dots together, and you're starting to see some patterns. What
happened by the time I got access to a clinical population, I had 6 years of higher educational brainwashing. Okay, so what I hated about it was that I couldn't check out anything that they were saying in those psychology books. None of us psych students had access to a clinical population to go see for ourselves. And we weren't going to be able to get to one because they're sealed off. You can't get in there. So you have to trust what these guys are saying in these textbooks. And it's like, oh, yeah, just trust us. And the first inkling I got was when we were assigned in abnormal psychology a paper to read by a clinical psychologist who wrote, if two crazy people met each other and they both had the same delusion, like both of them thought they were George Washington or something, this guy's saying that one of them would have to change his delusion into something else. And I'm like, why would that have to happen? Why, what, two crazy people have the same delusion? Why would one of them have to change? It makes no sense to me. What? But there's no way I could test it. So one of the first times when I put that in the back of my mind, I knew, I'm thinking maybe one day I'll be able to see what's going on with that for real, and just tucked it back there. And I was new on the psych unit at the time, and I was in charge of this, psych services for this entire unit. And, keeping track of who was coming on, who was leaving, new patients. And I was on rounds one morning, and I entered the second floor day room, which is a big hollow room with the patients would just mill around. And then there were spokes coming off it with all the rooms for the patients. So that was like their day room where they could come and meet and walk around. And I saw this new guy who was talking to himself. It was just like somebody talking on a telephone, only you can only hear one side of the conversation. And sometimes he would get animated and he was concentrating on what he was hearing, and he's walking around and, but you do, and, and he was carrying on this animated conversation with something. And, I knew it was, I knew they were hearing voices. I didn't know what the voices were. I didn't know what they were saying. So I started creeping up closer to him to see if I could catch what he was saying. And I got pretty close before he turned and he saw me, and he's like, I know he's thinking, you're dealing with paranoid people there that, he's probably thinking, well, why is this guy creeping up on me? So I had to say, before he did anything, I was like, hey, I'm the psych for this unit. I haven't seen you before. I just kind of wanted to come and meet you. I said, what's your name? And he looks at me and goes, I'm Jesus Christ. In the back of my head, I'm like, oh, okay. And I said, I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, no, you can't be Jesus Christ, because I am. And I'm sitting there on pins and needles going, okay, what's he going to do? Let's see if what this clinical psychiatrist said to me, 15, 20 years prior is actually true. And he looks at me and he thinks, you can see him, he cocks his head up and he's thinking about it. And then he looks me in the eye and he goes, okay, we can both be Jesus Christ. Then he strolls off. And I said, okay, that's another lie they told me. What other lies are they telling me? So it's like...
yeah, but I can't imagine any other psychotherapist doing that, because
you got to be crazy to do something like that.
You really, like, you're pushing the envelope all the time, but this is what's made you be this kind of iconoclast. You're kind of pushing through all of this. Do you look back and sort of think, how the hell did I make it through all these years of work, and how did I get through all of this? Because your drive to know the truth is what's allowed you to develop these.
For me, it was fascinating. It was the period of time to get there that was miserable for me.
Yeah.
It was all the hoops they made you jump through before you could access a clinical population and actually take a look for yourself.
Wow.
It was 6 years of stuff that I've never used, that I've forgotten, that wasn't useful on the clinical setting for the most part. There were some that was. Experimental psychology was great. Everything, you could see what was going on.
Yeah.
You could actually see it. You could verify it for yourself.
So is experimental psychology kind of covering like cognitive behavior therapy or anything like that? Is that part of that?
No, but cognitive behavior therapy is as close as the establishment has gotten so far.
Yeah.
It's not anywhere near what MACE is, but they're moving in the right direction there anyway.
Right. So just to clarify for the audience, because a lot of people mix up psychotherapists with psychiatrists. So psychiatrists can
dish out toxic drugs.
Right. And then the psychotherapist is usually dealing with what, like the trauma side or like the coping mechanism side?
They deal with everything else. Psychiatrists pretty much spend, the ones, if they're working in an institution, they spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes per patient.
Absolutely.
Maybe a week. At the state hospital, it was like 15 or 20 minutes a month.
Mm-hmm.
And they were getting pounded at a rate far higher than any of the other staff at the hospital, other than the attendants.
I know this from friends who are psych nurses and things like that. And I had an ex-boyfriend who ended up in a mental health, they call it a mental health unit in Australia. And most of the population were drug-induced psychosis.
Mm-hmm. Meth will do that.
Yeah. Well, my ex was pot. It was pot. So much pot that it went into psychosis. Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of pot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's an awful lot of pot.
Probably a lot of trauma too. So I witnessed for myself what was going on and kind of the energy of the place. And most of them were there because of drug-induced psychosis.
Yeah, you can feel the energy of those places. Yeah. So it was like this mistrust of, what I had of authority. Okay, so when I got to the psych hospital, the one of the first things I saw was, Jesus Christ, who did that thing, and then one of the next things I saw was that I would ask all the psychiatrists, like, what is this? What are the voices? What are they doing? Where do they come from? What do you know about them? They didn't know anything about them, except they were hallucinations. That's it. Yeah. Oh, they're just hallucinations. And I said, well, what caused it? Oh, a chemical balance in the brain.
Yes, that was the big thing.
It's a crap of crap. It's crap. It's just a pile of crap.
There is no test, right? There is no test.
No, there is no chemical imbalance.
Okay.
That was totally made up by, I think it was Eli Lilly in the 70s when they came out with Prozac. They didn't have an explanation for why their drugs worked.
Wow.
When the phenothiazines, the antipsychotics, first came out, they were discovered by accident in a dye lab in France. The same people who brought you the straitjacket, the French.
Oh, wow,
they're on it. They're on it.
Here's my question to you, Jerry, just about the pharmaceuticals. Do you think that in some cases the pharmaceuticals, being as poisonous as they are, do you think that exacerbated or made their susceptibility to these voices or these entities worse? Or do you, depending on the drug? Because I know that there is some that can cause psychosis, like Champix, for example, which is a pharmaceutical that is used to stop smoking, has major cases of psychosis.
These suckers don't care. Whatever they can sell you, they'll sell you. Whatever they can sell, they'll put out.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say. I'd say more they're. I guess in the long run, that with long-term use, they are poisonous. Short-term use, they're toxic.
Yeah.
They don't cure anything.
Yeah.
What they do is they just suppress psychiatric symptomatology.
Yes.
So none of those antipsychotic drugs that they're feeding these people are going to cure anything. Matter of fact, I'm fairly certain they don't want to cure because they've withdrawn. National Institute of Mental Health has withdrawn virtually all their funding from research for schizophrenia. And I think, I would guess, dollars to donuts, that was done by the pharmaceutical industry that doesn't want a cure. They're making, $34 billion a year, I think, on the selling of antipsychotic drugs.
Wow.
Let me see, the global antipsychotic drug sales have soared to $14.54 billion in 2021 and estimated to soar to $15.5 billion in 2022. Wow. $1 billion just in the sale of antipsychotic drugs. They're pushing them on kids now. They're pushing them on everybody.
That's insane, especially after lockdowns. I know that, especially after lockdown.
So they had this chemical imbalance crap, which they're brainwashing people in psychology and psychiatry. They've taken over the universities to teach this horse crap that there is it's caused by a chemical brain imbalance, and they got all these fancy experiments that, they publish the ones that they want out, and then the truth ones, they get pushed aside. So they got control of the printing presses for universities. They got control of the staff. They got control of what's being taught. So what I was taught was these, schizophrenia is due to a chemical brain imbalance. I believed that when I got to the state hospital. But then I watched as what was going on, and I'm going, okay, well, what chemicals are out of balance? And I watched psychiatrists time after time. Never, ever did I see them look for a baseline of what chemicals were out of balance and by how much. Never. They never gave any kind of test for okay, if it's chemical imbalance, what's out of balance and by how much? You would think there would be a test they would give before they start prescribing these drugs.
Because even for even antidepressants, they said this on all the major websites. We've got a website in Australia called Beyondblueorg, and it's supposed to be the go-to psychology website for all people who have mental health issues. And the number one thing they say is this is caused by a chemical imbalance, and
it's bull
therapy
crap.
And pharmaceuticals is what's going to help you.
It's bull crap.
Right.
Yeah, that's what they want you to believe because they're making a fortune on that.
Absolutely.
And what antidepressant drugs I have here somewhere where how much...
By the way, we're probably going to get this video banned on YouTube. I've had videos banned for medical misinformation before.
Golly. Yeah, $15.98 billion in 2023 for antidepressant drugs. These people are after money and control. They're none of those drugs are going to cure anything.
Right.
So when I saw this at the state hospital, and this was back in early 80s or late 70s, they never gave any tests. So I'd ask the psychiatrist, I said, well, what's your baseline? How do you know what's out of balance or by how much? Oh, the drug companies have taken care of that. They've done all that research. And I'm like, what? You trust the drug companies? That's like letting the fox in the hen house. Yeah. They're going to publish whatever they, what are you thinking? And, then I found out no such test ever existed.
Wow.
There is no test for any one of those 300 some psychiatric illnesses. There is not one clinical test. There is no lab work. There's no EEG. There's no nothing that will verify any of their diagnoses in any kind of physical matter.
So what about something like DID, so dissociative identity disorder? Did you ever come across anything labeled that in your work where someone has this compartmentalized mind and different personalities assigned to these different parts of their brain? Would you say that has, I mean, we know that that's based in trauma and that's what's caused the split and things like that, but could you say from your work with a lot of schizophrenic patients, knowing that these voices, you start to see these patterns and you start to realize this is something outside of the mind, this is something outside of the person, could a condition like DID be also one of these, are they being affected by entities and voices that are working through that person's body? What do you say to that?
What happens with trauma a lot of time is the person does find a place where, especially if it's intense, continuous trauma, they find a place where they can kind of withdraw to and just seal everything out, and then that becomes entrenched and it kind of affects the rest of their life. With schizophrenics, now there's different diagnoses of schizophrenics. The ones that are the most prevalent, and the ones that I work with the most are the paranoid schizophrenics, where they hear voices. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I had to conquer was to learn that this chemical imbalance stuff that they're pushing is garbage, and that the voices aren't hallucinations. Okay. Now I didn't realize that until I started pulling the patients away and in my office asking them, what are these voices telling you? And I was shocked that nobody else in the entire hospital that I knew had even the least interest in finding out what the voices said. They all believed that they were hallucinations.
They're kind of off limits, because I know that from witnessing schizophrenics in these populations. Like, it was like, you just stay away from them. Like, they just get drugged up. They get their drugs in the morning, and the nurses, etc. They kind of stay away from them. So I mean, I'm blown away by your bravery and your inquisitive mind that sort of pushes this boundary. and flouts the rules.
Well, I think I learned that as a kid. As my dad was kind of a rageaholic. So I was too small to fight back against him physically. But what I got pretty good at was pushing him right to the edge of an explosion, and then getting out of there.
Right.
And if I misjudged, the consequences were pretty severe. So that came in real handy with schizophrenics. It's like, how far can I push this guy to get the information I need out of him without setting him off?
Yeah. So can you give us some stories? Some people may not have heard them. So can you give us some stories of when you got into a clinical population, and that would have been, was it the prison system that was the where you were finally able to ask them questions?
Yeah, because I was told twice when I was working at the state hospital that psychiatrists found out I was asking patients what the voices were saying. They pulled me up in their office, said, "You will stop that. The voices are hallucinations, and you're asking questions about the hallucinations. It's only reinforcing them and making them worse." Yeah. I knew better than that by then, but you can't talk to these people. They're brainwashed in what they were taught in school. They believe it's all the truth. They're not looking around for any answers for what actually causes it. They're just dishing out drugs and getting paid a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
There's some good ones, but most of them are just drug pushers. They're pushing these different kinds of psychiatric drugs and being paid a lot of money for it.
Yeah. So tell us the story of some of the things where you're starting to question the patients, and you're in the prison system, and you're able to start developing this kind of book or case studies.
Yeah. Well, I kind of learned the basics when I was in the state hospital. I learned there were two main patterns that I saw to start with. Is one, these voices are consistently negative. They're not sometimes neutral, sometimes positives, sometimes anything in between. No, they're consistently negative. So the question has to be asked is, and all of them, every single patient I talked to, those voices were consistently negative, derogatory, abusive, nasty, rotten things, that would tell them all these awful things about themselves. You're no good. You're ugly. You're stupid. Nobody likes you. Your girlfriend's cheating on you. Your boyfriend's cheating on you. Just any kind of crap that would upset them. And it looked to me like that's what they were trying to do. So I was aware that they were running that pattern. It was negative. And the question is, what holds them on such a negative pattern? Why don't they drift and become negative or random? Why aren't they positive sometimes? Why aren't they neutral sometimes? Why are they consistently negative? And what holds them on that path was the first question I got. The second one was they were anti-religious. They did not like these patients going to church. They didn't like them going to chapel. They didn't like them reading the Bible. And I actually had patients come and tell me that if they read the 23rd Psalm, that these it was like throwing worms on a hot frying pan.
Yeah.
And the question there is like, why would a hallucination react like that?
Exactly.
Why would a hallucination be anti-religious?
Exactly.
And so when I got a piece of information from anywhere, especially in the state hospital, when I got something suspicious like that, when somebody comes and tells me, "Hey, when I played the 23rd Psalm, the voices hate it. They can't stand it. Then this is what they do." I started asking other patients, "Hey, take this with you, repeat it, and let me know what the voices do." The voices hated it. It was consistent. So why are the voices anti-religious? Why are they always negative? That doesn't fit in with their chemical imbalance hallucination stuff. Hallucinations don't run patterns.
Yeah.
So the further I went into this, the more patterns that we found. So when I got to I had to be careful at the state hospital, because the unwritten rule there is you don't do anything to upset these patients. Because psychiatrists were getting beat up at a horrendous rate there. And I couldn't figure it. They're spending 15, 20 minutes a month with these guys, and they're getting their eyes, they're
did you ever
getting punched out.
Did you ever get assaulted in any?
No, I never have. And the one time I almost did, it was my fault.
Wow.
You know, I knew I was pushing this guy too far, and I knew I shouldn't have been doing it.
What
and I was
happened?
showing off for an intern, and he picked up a friggin' chair. He picked up one of these big recliner chairs, and he threw it at me, and he clipped the top of my head. I could feel it go right through the top of, right through my hair. That's how close it was.
Wow.
But it was totally my fault. But
Yeah.
other than that, I'd never been assaulted, but I have had colleagues around me who have been.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and especially attendant staff. So getting past this chemical imbalance nonsense that they've put into my head,
Yeah.
you know, because if you believe it's a chemical imbalance, there's nothing you can do about it.
No.
You know, they take all your personal power. It's gone. You have to rely on us. You have to come and see us. You have to pay us for office visits. You have to pay us for these drugs. They got you.
Mm-hmm.
You're helpless without them. That's basically the message. You know?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the hallucinations, if they're running patterns, if these voices are running patterns, they can't be hallucinations.
So
There's something else going on there.
So what are the patterns that you noticed? I know you had like a checklist of certain things, and I was talking to you off air about this and how it related to some experience that I had with a Ouija board and an unseen entity that it sounded very similar to the patterns that you were talking about with your patients there that you started gathering.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that thing. I had it in here somewhere. Here it is.
Sure.
Okay, I knew it was here. It shouldn't. I got it in the wrong place. So you know, the first of the pattern. So now this is, you know, for any psychotherapists or family members that are out there listening. Okay, what the Psychiatric Mafia and Big Pharma have done to you so far is they've created these causes that you couldn't verify.
Yeah.
You know, they started with mothers. Mothers caused schizophrenia by they did this and they did that and they whatever. You know, that's easily verified. Mothers could go, screw you, I didn't do that. And my son's schizophrenic anyway, so they could see that. So now they moved it up into the genetic realm. Okay, that was the second tactic they pulled. Now the average guy doesn't have access to a genetic lab or the kind of, you know, education you need to verify something like that. So here again, they take it and they pick it up out of the realm of verification by not only the population, but by psychiatrists and psychotherapists and psychologists and counselors. It's out of their realm.
Yeah.
You know, oh, it's genetic. Oh, well, we don't understand anything about genetics. We just have to trust them because they're the doctors. Bull. You know?
Wow.
So the geneticists eventually figured this out. They found no genetic gene. There was no genetic basics for it. You know,
Right.
So once that was debunked, they had to come up with something else. See, they're looking for an explanation, a physical explanation for what causes mental illness.
Yeah.
And it's in the spiritual realm. It's not in the physical realm. Now, the damage might be done to the spirit.
Would bipolar be part of this as well? Because, you know, they you know, I've heard people say, oh, that's genetic and it's this and that, but
Well, there might be a genetic predisposition, maybe, but they haven't even proved that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So here's psychiatry. So it starts out with, you know, the whole medical system was taken over by the deep state and the Rockefellers back in the 30s, where they, you know, with the Flexner report, where they bought off Congress, saying that no medical school will be able to graduate doctors unless they taught pharmacological medicine.
It may have even been earlier than that, because I remember that they took over the Merck Manual back in the early 1900s. So, and they scrubbed a whole heap of medications that were like natural therapies and stuff. So,
Right. They got that. They outlawed natural therapies like Tesla's violet ray. All this naturopathic stuff, totally outlawed. And if any doctor taught it or referred one of their patients to a alternative practitioner, they were in deep hot water.
Wow.
You know, so they took over the medical system then, and they started pushing this pharmacology pill stuff, pharmakia, you know, over and over, and that's where it is today. the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia run the Western mental health system.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
You know, and you look at what they're doing. I mean, the whole planet is flooded with psychiatric drugs, more so than ever in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
You know, and look in the United States last year, you know, 46,000 Americans, close to 50,000, killed themselves.
Yeah.
That's as many as who died in the Vietnam War. Even with all these drugs that they're dishing out to everybody, the suicide rate between 1999 and 2019 increased 33%.
Yes.
And it's been going up since then.
Yes, and I know there was a psychiatrist who worked for the Veterans Association for the VA coming out and talking to Congress about how nobody's looking at how many of the the veterans are taking antidepressants, and how many, in the correlation between that and their suicide rates, and all the ones that were on the antidepressants were committing suicide, and and it was all just swept under the rug. So that's
what they're doing. But look what they're doing. They've got almost 623,000 children. These are children under the age of 5 on psychiatric drugs right now. Here in the United States, 80,235 are on ADHD drugs, or what that is meth. Okay, and I ran into prisoners in the prison who were meth addicts, locked up for whatever they were doing, and I asked them. They were prescribed ADHD drugs as a kid. Mm-hmm. And I asked them,
amphetamine.
Yeah. I said, well, you were feeling as good as you ever have. Why did you keep going? And the answer was, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But there were a ton of prisoners in the prison for meth abuse, and that was interesting. That meth cracks open the spiritual protection people have. It just cracks it open.
Absolutely.
And they start hearing voices, and while they're high. And then when they come down, the voices disappear. So they go, oh, yeah, I was just hallucinating. And that might go on for maybe a month or 2 or 3. And then one day they don't go away. And they're there. And they're just as psychotic as any of the patients in the state hospital. Yeah. So they got over 80,000 kids in the U.S. on ADHD drugs right now. They had 38,000 on antidepressants. These are kids. 85,143 on antipsychotic drugs that destroy the brain.
Yes.
And it's probably similar throughout the Western Mental Health Center, including Australia and Britain.
Absolutely.
They've got 389,000 or almost 390,000 on anti-anxiety drugs, and they're addicting. The antidepressant market, like I said, is expected to reach $15.98 billion by 2023.
Yeah.
Antipsychotics won $15.5 billion by 2022. None of these drugs cure anything. Nothing. They just suppress psychiatric symptoms. That's all they do.
Uh-huh. And
you got people waiting.
Plenty of side effects. Yeah.
Oh, awful side effects.
So talk about.
They actually shrink the brain.
Yes, absolutely. Atrophy the brain. And I do know that if you're on an antipsychotic drug in Australia, because we've got a welfare system that gives you funding, to be off work or disability, etc. The minute, you've got that written on your application for welfare that you're taking these antipsychotic drugs, you're put immediately on a pension, on a disability pension, because they know you can't work, right? They know you're gone. Your mental capacity is. You don't even have to do a test. Like they're like, right, that right there, you're on disability.
Yeah, that's bad, because I believe that, because after 7 years at the state hospital, our job was to get these guys out working. So I thought, well, that's a real chore to get them out working and to keep them out working. It was like a struggle. Yeah. When I got out into the community, started working in the mental health center, I started seeing lots of people who were hearing voices and still working. And that shocked me because, you know, the system I was enclosed in, it was the same thing. Oh, these guys can't work and we got to get them to the point where they can. No, there's lots of people out there who are hearing voices and working. And among them are truck drivers. They love that job. I learned that from the prisoners when I worked in prison. They don't have to talk to anybody. They don't have to interact with too many people.
They're high on amphetamines to keep them awake, to do the long distance truck driving. So a lot of them are abusing the amphetamines for that reason. So I want you to read the list, because the reason why the main thing that I wanted people to comprehend here is that, you know, we're talking, and my audience is very well aware of this unseen realm where these voices exist. And I sort of wanted you to get to this point where you're talking about your experience in psychotherapy with these schizophrenic patients and these patterns that these voices, these hallucinations seem to be running, that make us think it's not just a hallucination. So can you So for any of you psychotherapists out there, or people who are dealing with schizophrenia in their families, you can verify this for yourself. You don't need any geneticist to tell you, hey, this, or any biochemist to tell you. It's not that complicated. You can see it for yourself. The number one is these voices are consistently negative. You know, they're derogatory, they're insulting, they're abusive, they're destructing, they're self-sabotaging. They're not good things consistently. You know, again, the question is what holds them to that pattern? Number two, they're anti-religious. They hate the victim attending church. They hate them reading the Bible. They hate them following any kind of spiritual path, or they hate the 23rd Psalm. They hate Psalm 91. That really sets them off. Why would a hallucination be anti-religious? They foster and create negative emotion. That's what they want. They feed off of negative emotion, and it took me years to find this out. That's the reason they're so abusive. They feed off of that negative emotion, so they have to create it before they can take it. Yeah, it's known as loosh. Right. Loosh. Yeah, it's loosh. Yep. So they energetically drain their victims. So they're energetic parasites. You know, I've had patients, especially in the prison, they said, you know, when they're laying around in bed being attacked by the voices all night, they said they can feel their energy leaving them. You know, after the voices attack, they can feel their energy gone. And that was consistent. You know, I thought for years and years that was because of the anxiety they caused. But, you know, there was a situation I came up with once on the maximum security block with two prisoners that were in the same cell under the same conditions. It was like a perfect experimental situation. And after I saw that, I realized, no, it's not the anxiety. You know, there's something else going on. Another strange pattern is they get louder after sunset, and they get loudest between 3 and 4 in the morning. You know, why would a hallucination do that? Yeah. And in the old folks' home, they call it sundowner syndrome. Yeah, I was going to say, don't they have that with? They say that's part of what's it called? Dementia, that they call it sundowns. Yeah, right, and also So that's interesting because my own experience with these entities that kind of attack, they usually wake you up at about 3 a.m. around that time. Right. And they don't want you to sleep. They don't want you to sleep, right? And they're causing this disruption. They don't want you to sleep. If they can keep you from sleeping, they beat you down and they have more control. Yeah. You know, you don't have the resistance to stand up to them. You're weaker, right? Yeah. So they don't want you to sleep. And you're right, about 3 in the morning, they wake you up and they start their crap, start screaming at you, start calling you names and telling you how worthless and stupid you are and all that kind of stuff over and over. So they get louder after sunset. They get louder when ignored. They will not be ignored. You know, and I don't know how many times I've seen psychiatrists tell patients, oh, just ignore them. They're hallucinations. Just don't pay any attention to them. I remember the first time I checked that out at the state hospital, I was sitting in a meeting with the psychiatrist and a certain patient. And, you know, the patient said, I'm still hearing the voices. And the psychiatrist said, well, just ignore them. They're hallucinations. You know, don't pay any attention to them. I called that guy in a week later and I asked him, well, how's that working for you, bud? You know, I didn't know. And he said, not working at all. They got louder. Wow.
So I started checking that out with the rest, that, hey, have you tried to ignore the voices? Oh, yeah. Consistently. Anyone who tries to ignore them, they get louder, they dig in. They will not be ignored.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with them in other ways. They foster self-destructive and sabotaging behavior. Schizophrenics are some of the most self-destructive saboteurs of their own progress. These voices don't want them to succeed at anything. They increase conflict, turmoil, and suffering. They sabotage any positive movement the person wants to make. Anything they try to start, they try to trip them up on the jobs.
Do you think it's so that they could drop them from a higher height? So as this person's progressing and getting better, that if they somehow make them sabotage, then the payoff is a bigger grief or a bigger sort of pain that is exuding from the patient. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like they're building you up to drop you from a higher height so that they can feed off the pain and suffering after that. Do you think that?
I wouldn't put anything past them.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are so sly, it's incredible.
Yes.
I mean, just so sly, you wouldn't even believe it. If you read the screw tape letters that is talking about what these things are, you can see how sly they actually are, but that they want to create that disharmony, that panic, that paranoia, because that's what they feed off of. And the reason they get the patients to beat up psychiatrists is because those drugs actually calm them down. Those antipsychotic drugs are major tranquilizers. That's the only reason they work. They calm the patient down. There's no chemical imbalance, anything. They calm them down. They don't want to be calmed down. They don't want the patient to be calmed down.
They want major emotional outbursts.
They want all that
zombie
going.
Okay.
Yeah. So what they do is they take these nasty side effects of these antipsychotic drugs, and they're ugly. Now these drugs have a place. I mean, there's a lot of patients I would have never have been able to reach if they weren't on drugs. They would have been unreachable. And then there's some that are so violent, they're murderous that you have to keep them on these drugs. So that these drugs have their place, but not as a constant source of suppression of all they do is they don't get at the cause of anything. They don't cure anything. They just suppress psychiatric symptoms. So where they really want these patients is either isolated in their rooms alone with everybody sealed out, and unfortunately that happens way too often. And the parents are going to go, let them stay in there and get them away from us.
Yes.
And they can hear them in there talking to the voices. That's exactly where the voices want them, or in prison. Because prison is a very negative, hostile environment, and it constantly generates. This negative emotion.
How did you cope with this negative frequency coming at you?
It was hard. You could feel it. As soon as you walked into the prison, you could just feel it. It was this heavy, like and it was like the rule there was anything you try to do good gets punished.
Yes.
It was a fairly difficult environment. For the first 10 years, they let me go on my own. I could do groups. I could develop programs. I could, do all kinds. The last 10 years were just absolute hell. Wow. They started taking more and more control, limiting what you could do. More and more paperwork, more and more prisoners coming in, less and less staff.
Yes.
It was bad. I just barely made it out of there. It was like. Just barely.
So, Jerry, is there more to the list? Because as you're reading these,
they demand
They
demand the victim's attention. They want the victim's attention. So it's a battle for their attention.
Yeah.
They're constantly maneuvering for increased control over the individual. They're constantly chipping away at it. They gaslight. They're constantly gaslighting. If a schizophrenic's walking down the sidewalk and some people are laughing off to the side right away, hey, they're laughing at you. They know what you're, It's all about you. They can manipulate perception and bend it to their will, so they can take a neutral situation and manipulate the person's perception of it in a negative manner. The one thing that's really interesting is they have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. Yes. Because they're energetic beings, they don't operate in the physical universe. They operate in the as John Mace says, in the energy universe.
Yes.
There's no space there. There's no time there. There's no matter there.
Mm-hmm.
So they can go into the victim's mind and they can pull up every rotten thing they'd ever done and rub it in their face.
It's like they're operating us. They have access to the physical body and they can operate, I don't know, through DNA, through cell memory. And they're able to, and the person starts to think, in some cases, that it's their own thoughts for that very reason.
Well, yeah, and that's what they want them to think.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a bunch of patients ask, "Who are you? What are you?" And they say, "We are you."
Yes.
So they want the patient to think that those thoughts belong to them, and we're taught that from the time we're kids. We're taught that all your thoughts that come into your head belong to you. No, that's far from true. You know, Swedenborg said none of your thoughts belong to you.
Yes, that's true.
And there's
we're the observer of the thoughts. Our real self is the observer of the thoughts.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That's
so they have to understand that those thoughts are not theirs. You know, if they're going to make any movement at all, they have to understand that they're not theirs, and the voices want them to think they are.
Do you see why I asked you on the show? Because here I am. So most of my audience are very open to psychic phenomena. They've experienced it themselves. I have a lot of healers, spiritual healers and energetic healers in the audience. I have a lot of professionals who work with clients who are mediums, who are psychics, and who are channelers. Now, I myself can channel as a medium. I can channel, but through really... I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm 46 years old. I'm turning 47, and I've been doing this for about 30 years. And I had to learn the hard way to distinguish between these unseen voices that are destructive and malevolent, and my own higher self, my own inner thoughts. And there's a big difference. And this is why I'm so strict on this protection and clearing and all of that sort of stuff. But I wanted to tell you this story very quickly, Jerry, about that list that you've got there. When you were reading out on one of your podcasts, I was like, holy shit, this fits into an experience I had with a Ouija board when I was in my early 20s. Now, I knew not to touch them, but for some strange reason, some friends from university and I, we were doing a group project, and they were around my house, and I was really into the psychic stuff because I'd only just started doing psychic readings. And I had this board game from a bookstore called The Psychic Circle. And it didn't look dark or negative, and we pulled it out and we started using it, and it was pretty exciting. And we did a prayer to protect ourselves. And then when my friends left, I thought, I want to try and do it by myself. So I started doing this thing. I should have been studying, but I started using this. Now, in the space of a week, I thought I was in contact with a spirit guide using this Ouija board by myself. And it grew into this situation where by the end of the week, I thought I was crazy. By inviting this thing in, this disembodied voice into my energy field, this was communicating me. So it started off by really sweet talking me and trying to test the boundaries.
Yeah, that's what you have to watch out for.
Can I touch you? Can I touch you? Oh, wow, you're very psychic. You can hear me, and it started to test if I could hear it. And I started documenting all the things it was saying, thinking I was so psychic that I could tap into the spirit guide, and I was using this and so it started to sweet talk me. It started to think that it could appeal to my ego. Now, even back then, I didn't really have like this massive ego. It's trying to tell me I'm the best psychic in the world, and I'm going to be the most famous psychic. I'm going to be famous one day. And things started to feel really icky. It started to isolate me. It started to say, you can't tell anyone that we're talking to you.
Yeah.
I started closing my bedroom door because I was embarrassed. I was trying to hide what I was doing. So my family knew something was off because I was really isolating myself. This is in the space of 1 week. I was neglecting things. They would follow me everywhere. I started to see that it wasn't just when I pulled the board out. Now, I never suffered from depression. I was very healthy mentally, and this because I allowed it into my energetic field, it was able to get in. It got permission, but it was very, very, very sneaky. It would wake me up every night on the dot at 3 a.m. I would look over at my clock. I would be woken and it would be on top of me and it would shake the bed. I would feel it. I remember catching a train to go to university and it would follow me and it would talk in my ear and go, this person over here is this. And it would predict things to the point where I remembered it would predict things and they would happen. So it would say, see that dog over there? I'm going to make it bark. And without it, I kid you not, I'm walking into the campus and this dog looks past me, next to me, and starts barking crazily at nothing. And then I walk
I've seen him do that too. I've seen him do that several times.
I'd walk into the university. I'd go into my first class, and my favorite, class. I studied theater, so I had playwriting. And I remember, as I'm walking in, this entity says to me, who I thought was my spirit guide, "Your lecturer really likes you, and he thinks you're really attractive. Watch this. I'm going to make him say what he really thinks." I walk in and I go, "Hi, hi Tim, how you going?" And I swear it was like something forced him to turn around, look at me and say, you're so attractive. And he just started confessing all these feelings to me. And I'm just looking at my teacher going, what the hell? And even the teacher went like as if something had come over him. So this was really freaking me out. Now here, all this time I'm going, wow, I'm really psychic. Wow, this spirit guide's telling me all this stuff. But it got to the point where it had isolated me so much, I started actually seeing it move objects. And then it started pulling me into a kind of a negative thought process. And finally I had enough. And I went for a really long walk. I was really, really upset. And it started begging me to not, I started ignoring it. And it started begging me and saying, no, you can't let us go. We're your friend. I'm your spirit guide. You can't let us go. And it was like, and I was just walking. I was like, I got to get rid of it. I've just got to ignore it. I've got to ignore it. And every time I ignored it, it kept pleading with me. And I finally got back home and I remembered saying, go away. And I screamed at it. And I ran to the bookshelf, pulled out the Bible. I opened it, and I kid you not, I opened it to I think it was Luke, or I can't remember if it was Luke or Matthew. And it was this verse where Jesus expels demons out of people. And I could hear this
amazing?
Voice scream, and it disappeared.
Wow. So I've seen that a lot. They move in first, oh, I'm your spirit guide. I can help you. I know things, and they show that they know things that you don't.
But I could see it spiral into this negativity because it started to, that's when it started turning. And this is where I say that
that's common.
Yes.
That's common. So if you're messing with that as soon as she started telling me that, I'm like, oh boy, I hope she knows what she's doing.
Well, I was only really young and I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned the hard way. And that was, years later, when I had my own sort of inner guidance and my own angelic sort of guidance, they were like, you had to learn the hard way so that you could know what the true inner voice was, so that you never did that again, so that you never ever do that again. And that was a good thing. But if I was any weaker mentally, I think that this it could have been really disastrous because I felt deep depression by the end of the week. A person who never suffered from depression, deep, deep despair, like a black cloth had come over me. And that's why I said, enough. I don't want anything to do with this. I'll do a video about this, everybody, if you want to know the real story about it. But it goes on. But, I cleared it there and then, So, what do you think of this?
I've seen that same thing many times. And there's a number of patients who I've worked with that never got off. They started with the Ouija board and they didn't recover that fast. It grabbed hold of them and they ended up on the psych ward. Ouija boards are extremely dangerous. They're extremely. Do not use those things, man. Do not use them. I've seen prisoners that ended up in prisons when they started using Ouija boards. Yes. They're not a toy. They're very dangerous. And these things do exactly what you said. They try to befriend you and get your trust. And, oh, cool, I got a spirit guide, and he knows stuff I don't know, and he can help me. And then they can maintain like a decent facade for a short period of time, but eventually they start turning on you.
I mean, they're tricksters, right? So, like, this is the thing that because I know people that are going to say to me, no, it's just your own thoughts. It's just your own thoughts. What's the difference? Like, you call them voices, I call them entities. What do you say to people who say, well, you've just manifested it from your own negative thoughts? It's just your own negative thoughts.
Well, Sherry Sweeney, the co-author of my book, she fought a battle with these voices when she was a young gal, and they almost killed her. Yes. And she came up with a rule which looks to me to be valid. She said, every negative thought you have about yourself or somebody else comes from the dark side. Yes. Those thoughts don't come from you. You're like a radio receiver. So I'm just going to show everyone. So, no, you got me. I got you. I'm just showing everyone your book. Yeah, we now have it translated into German, Spanish, and French. Fantastic. So this is the book I ordered but didn't get here in time, and that's An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. So it's Jerry Marzinsky and Sherry Sweeney, and both of you come from, Sherry's an engineer, or she was an engineer, right? She's an engineer. She's got her foot in both worlds. Yeah. Where so I'm kind of off to the side and on the opposite. But it's so strange I attract all these engineers. Yes, and this is what all my friends almost are engineers. Yeah, engineering mental. So it's kind of like opposites attract. Yes. So you want a basic primer into what these voices are and how we came to that conclusion. That book contains them. Yeah. But they do that. I've seen them predict things just like you said. Yeah. And those things came to pass. Matter of fact, they would tell the meth addicts. When they ran out of meth, the voices would say, show up at this corner at this time and somebody will come with the meth. And time after time after time, they did. Okay, so knowing that, I know the answer to this because of the spirit world that I work with, but what do you think they are? Because time and space doesn't seem to exist for them, right? No, it doesn't. So they can follow the person wherever. They can follow them underwater. They can follow them wherever they go. Because they're not physical entities, but I think there's different classes of them. Yeah. We talk about this in entity release. I work with Laura Whitworth, who developed soul center healing hypnosis. I hope one day I can get you to meet her because she studies psychotherapy as well, and she's developed a technique to release entities, and there are so many different types of things. You got the demons, you got I had an archon removed from me, which is like it insisted it is not a demon, that demons are its minion, right? I've had big demons. I've had there's AI, there's little gremlins, there's earthbound spirits, there's all sorts of things. So, but particularly these voices, do you think that they're a specific kind of class of things, or do you think it's a combination of this unseen world? Well, it could be a combination. So the two that I find most prevalent in schizophrenics are the dark spirit entities and the earthbound entities. So a lot of times there'll be an earthbound entity that has a dark spirit entity attached to it. So they're both in there. Yes. And usually with addiction, what Laura says is that nearly almost always with people who have like alcoholics, they will have earthbound alcoholic spirits attached. Right. Many. Right. Getting them to keep drinking. And I'm assuming same with the drugs, right? So you're in a prison population. You've got prisoners who've died in the prison system. Maybe they're haunting the prison. These guys are getting more and more attachments. The people who are in the prison. I mean, if you didn't go in there with an entity attached, you sure would leave with an entity attached. I have no doubt about it. The prisons are one of the most destructive institutions that they have. Absolutely. Very few people come out of there in better shape than when they went in. Yeah, I've seen them release psychotics that I knew they were going to kill somebody within 6 months, but they did their sentence, so they're done.
Yeah.
They give them 2 weeks worth of psych drugs, release them with $50, and say, okay, go to the nearest ER when you run out. Then the ER isn't going to give them any drugs. They just dump them out on the streets.
Here's just a random question. If someone's spent, say, 30 years in prison, do you think that this person is going to leave clean and mentally healthy? Right.
No, I doubt it. Matter of fact, they probably, a lot of them that have been in for that length of time, they get out and they can't cope with the world.
Yeah.
Everything has changed. It's like they've been in suspended animation for a decade or two, and the world is totally different than the way, and they just freaked out. And they'll go into a bank and just
they'll rob it and then go Shawshank
rob it, pull out a butter knife or something and say, just to get back in again because they can't function. Yeah. And the recidivism rate in a lot of these prisons is 50 to 70%. I mean, would you buy a car if there was a 50% chance of it blowing up, having a major malfunction in 3 years? No. They don't allow real therapeutic programs in there. What I saw when I worked in the prison, it was more for show. It's like, oh yeah, we got this program, we got that program, to make it look like they were good do-gooders. But anything that really worked, they made short work of it.
Yes. So yes, exactly, because it needs to maintain the dark sort of side of things that is kind of running the system, because this whole system needs to be deconstructed.
Oh yeah,
everything, schooling, everything, the prison system, the banking system. So here's something I noticed, and so I come from a Lebanese background now. Even though I'm a Christian background, I have friends who are Muslim, and in our culture in general, we talk about the jinn. Okay, yes. So jinn means and majnoon means like that you're crazy, right? The actual word jinn, it's actually written about in the Quran. Like they have a whole chapter on it. And so even as Christians, if we have, say, a curse or we believe there's a haunting or something, quite often we will go to the Islamic sheikhs, and we get them to come and help clear a lot of these things, because they know this. They know that about the black magic. Right. They know about the jinn. Now, this is something interesting that I picked up about one of your interviews. You were saying that I think you had one of the guys that you were working with that you were helping clear the voices, and he was saying that he would often hear a whole family of voices, kind of like a father, a mother, a child, and like there was a whole family of them. Now, what people don't know is that in Middle Eastern culture, in the Arab culture, because I think the jinn actually are around even before Islam. They believe that when they were created, that they exist in their own realm. They have families. They have a hierarchy, they have children, they have a culture of their own, they have their own religion, their own way of life. And this kind of brings me to this story where, we've got this patient who heard these voices with different sort of voices of different ages. Now, are they mimicking those ages? Are they just tricksters and mimicking different age groups? Or do you think this might be a real realm of
Well, there is a realm, and they do have different categories. They have the kind of worker bees, like the everyday minion voices that are assigned to destroy their victim, and then they have somebody supervising them.
Yes,
I had one patient where I guess their supervisor felt he wasn't doing a good enough job at destroying this one gal, so they took him out and they put another meaner one in there. Yes, so they're assigned to destroy their victim.
And they have that in, Well, they talk about this in the jinn. Like the jinn, there is the ifrit, and there's the shaitan, and then there's there's like lower ones and things like that. So they do have that as well. But here's the other interesting thing I wanted to ask you about. So in the Quran, apparently, so angels, when God created angels, they were made from light. when he created humans, they were made from clay, which I suspect means earth or material world. And the jinn were made from smokeless fire. So could that be electricity or ether? So I know one of your stories, you experienced something that was quite frightening, where you actually witnessed the voices manifesting in a way.
Oh, yeah. So, now that you mention that was, it sounded like smokeless fire. It sounded like electricity.
Yeah.
It was, one of the voices really got pissed off at me, because the patient was recovering.
Could you tell the story? I know you've told it on other podcasts, but some people may not have seen it. Could you tell us the story of that particular incident?
I can tell that story. So this happened in the prison, and it was what I'd have around me was a group of maybe 10 to 15 prisoners that I picked out special, who were schizophrenic, hearing voices. And the deal I made with them is that you tell me what they're saying in real time. When you hear them, when we're in session, you tell me what they're saying, so I can see for myself. And then I saw that they were running these patterns. So I would try to figure out ways to kind of throw a monkey wrench in those patterns that would trip them up, because I wasn't convinced that they were demons even at that time. It was like, I don't know what they were, but I know they were bad. I know they're destructive. And I was thinking there's a part of me that just didn't want to admit that they were demons. It was kind of like I suppressed that for years and years. And here's the evidence building and building and building and building and building. And I'm still denying it. I didn't want to see it, but it's starting to get shakier and shakier. So the deeper I got into it, the shakier it got. So when I started experimenting with, throwing monkey wrenches into these patterns to trip these things up, a number of different clients would come in and they'd say they're starting to get mad at you. They're really starting to get pissed at you. They don't like what you're doing. And I'm like, well, tough beans, tell them to stick their head in the toilet and get lost. So first there was a swarm of that happening, all these different prisoners that they didn't know each other. I mean, it was a big unit. Most of them, they didn't know each other. Second thing that happened is one of them, who was doing pretty well, we finish up his session. He's doing good. The voices are getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And he turns around in the doorway as he's leaving, and he looks her right in the eye and he says, "You know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you?" And I just looked at him and like, what? I didn't say anything. It just took me off guard. And then he turns around and he walks away. And I'm just sitting there like, what was that all about? I'm thinking, well, the voices are in their heads. They're not, they can't get me. They're stuck in them. Yeah. And although it was kind of a little bit unnerving, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. So I kept working with this guy, and he's getting better and better and better. And, then he comes in one day without a pass. So I had a agreement with this group that I was working with. If you really run into trouble, you look like you're going to go off and get yourself in trouble and do something stupid, throw some pebbles at my window and I'll get you in as soon as I can. Okay. So this guy comes in without a pass. Somehow he got past the guard up front, and he knocks on the door, and I open it in my office, and he goes, "The voices want to talk to you." Wow. And I'm like, it's like in the morning, and I'm like half awake, and I'm like, what? Yeah, the voices want to talk to you. And they want to talk to me personally. He goes, yeah, they want to talk to you personally. I said, oh, okay, come in. Because I've talked to him before, but through the patient. It was through, they would say something, I would say something to the patient. The patient would tell, he's the translator. Yeah. There was never any direct communication between us. And here's this guy saying they want to talk to you directly. Mm-hmm. So I bring him in, he sits down, and I said, okay, well, what do they got to say? And these words came out of his mouth. It said, "You have no right to interfere with our way of life." And I'm like sitting there going, do. It was like Outer Limits, like boom. That was like,
Jim, they have their own way of life.
Yeah. My denial system just crashed. It just crashed. It was well, it didn't fully crash. That it got real shaky. Pieces started falling off it. It's like it was in shambles when he said that. It was like it was my first realization that these things weren't hallucinations. They weren't. They weren't the person's own thoughts. They weren't some figment of the imagination. That they were real. They were independent. They were freestanding, and they were trying to take over these patients. And it was like that was a major hit.
And then you saw physical evidence after.
That was the next. After the next few weeks of seeing this patient, the same guy.
Yeah.
So. He comes in, and he came in without a pass. Somehow got past the guard, and he sits down. And he's what I was doing at that time. I was reading a book by Miguel Ruiz called the Voice of Knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah, the same guy that wrote the Four Agreements, but it was the Voice of Knowledge, and it talked about how these things were parasites.
Yes.
How they drained your energy. And that's exactly what I was seeing happening.
Yeah.
So I brought it in, and I had a paragraph outlined. I was going to, because I was always asking patients stuff. What about this? What about that? How do they react to this? What do they do when this happens? It was constantly, I was asking them questions, and they were constantly giving me feedback. Hundreds and hundreds of them. So I said, I'd like your opinion on what this shaman has to say. And I started reading that section about them being parasitic entities. And all of a sudden, this guy gets this glaze in his eyes. It's like he's looking really weird, and he's sitting there. He's just staring at me in this strange way. And then all of a sudden, behind me, the door was closed. Behind me, here's this crackling. Like an arc welder. It was just as loud as an arc welder. You hear that crack, 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 crack. It was this electrical crackling. And I turn around and I don't see anything. And then it starts moving up the wall to my right. And it's like crack, 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 crack. And it's like just electricity. It's like a short circuit electricity, just crackling. And I look at him, and he's got this zombie-like look on his face. And I'm going, uh-oh, he's going to attack. So I push my chair back against the wall. So if he jumps me, I can at least kick him back, because what they put in the unit then, in the medical unit, was female guards. What are they going to do against something like this? They're not going to be much help. So, I'm ready for him to attack me, and I'm afraid to take my eyes off of him.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing this crackle, so I'm moving my attention back and forth, like looking, where's this? I could hear it, but I couldn't see it. There was no smell to it. It was like crack, crack, crack. It was going all the way up the wall at a 45-degree angle, and I'm switching my attention back and forth between him and the wall, and I don't see anything on the wall. I don't see anything burning. I don't see any smoke. And then I look at him, and I said, "Do you hear that?" And he doesn't say anything. He's just staring at me with this zombie look.
What did you think
frozen.
At that point? Did you think it was something paranormal? Oh, okay.
I was just, I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It was like, what the hell is happening here? And it's like, another one, outer limits time. And it starts crackling across the ceiling over his head, moving from right to left. So I could watch him and watch where the noise was coming from at the same time. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't smell anything. I couldn't feel anything. It starts crackling down the wall to my left, where, I was close to that wall, and there was a Rubbermaid trash can right next to my leg. And it jumps into that trash can, and it's crackling right next to my leg. So I stoop over and I look down there, and there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. The inmate porter had cleaned it the night before. All it was a plastic bag. There wasn't anything there.
And was his eyes glazed over this whole time?
His eyes were glazed over. He's just sitting there like he didn't move. He didn't say anything. He didn't twitch. He didn't move. He looked like he was a frozen zombie.
Does his eyes kind of go black, or
no? I wasn't looking at his eyes real close. I was, it was like after this started happening, I just looked at him, and I could see that his eyes were kind of glazed over. But after that, I wasn't looking at him very much. And then after this crackling, it just stopped just as fast as it started. It was just boom, just quit. And I look at him, and he gets up very slowly, and he goes, I gotta leave. And he kind of shuffles out of the office, and I'm kind of going, yeah, get out of here, go. I don't want, go, don't come back. And I get up after he leaves, and I look at the route that thing had taken. I didn't see any burn marks on the walls or anything. There was no explanation. So I walk out into the hallway, and the doctor wasn't in yet. The nurse wasn't in yet. There was no psychiatrist there.
The rest of the day trying to work out what the hell this is.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, what do you say?
Office,
I mean, I hear these stories of you. You've got physical evidence. I've got physical evidence, what I experienced. I mean, this thing was moving stuff, and I don't think it was one entity either. But then you've got people like Paul Levi who wrote Wetiko and claims it's a mind virus, and it's just these thoughts that people have across. It's like a virus.
Well, the negative identities are kind of like a mind virus. They're kind of like a computer virus. But these things I think, are in a different category.
Yes.
And
they're below like our visual spectrum, our light spectrum. They're like infrared and below, right?
Yeah, so, you can't see them, but you can see the shadow people sometime. And I don't know exactly what they are, but they're associated with schizophrenia. The schizophrenics see them, the drug addicts, the meth addicts see them all the time. So after that guy left, it was like 3 or 4 months before I got the courage to call him in again. I didn't want to see him. I was too freaked out.
And this is the one who was going to make a shiv, right? That's
him. Yeah, that was him. So I call him in, and I said, I asked him, did you hear that? Did you hear that crackling the last time you were in here? And he goes, yeah, I heard it. He said, but I was surprised you did, meaning me. And I said, yeah, what was that? And he said, that was them. And I said, the voices? He said, yeah, they were the voices. And I said, What were they doing? What were they trying to do? He said, they were trying to scare you off.
Wow.
And I said, they did a damn good job of it. So I asked him after that, I said, what were they telling you as you shuffled out of my office? What were they telling you? Because you looked really weird. You shuffled out like a zombie. What were you hearing when you left my office? He said, they were telling me to go get a shank and stick it in your gut. And I was thinking, he's, he would never do anything like that. I've been working with him for 6 months. We got along fine. And then he told me that, and I was like, whoa, So
how many crimes do you think are occurring because of these voices? And I mean, and not everybody, And the thing is, they're not just voices, are they, Jerry? Because, in the normal population, in the population out there, we don't hear them as audible, disembodied voices outside of ourselves. They kind of take over us, and we think it's our own.
Well, that's what they want you to think. They put these negative thoughts into your mind.
Yes.
They feed them into your mind,
from trauma,
and they want you to think that they are you, that they're coming from you. And that's reinforced by psychiatry, what we learn as kids. Everybody believes all your thoughts are yours. No way. They insert those thoughts when they get very strong, and they're no longer worried about losing control. They will move outside of the patient, and they'll start talking to him from outside.
Yes.
They'll hear them actually outside their body when they know they've got them.
I know, even after 1 week of doing that Ouija board thing, and I still remember this. I mean, this turned me off stuff for years, right? Because I was so scared. I felt like I missed the whole companionship of this thing that was following. You know what I'm saying? And that's 1 week.
I had one patient a week. We worked for months to clear that thing out of him. He was a stockbroker on Wall Street, making hundreds of thousands a year.
Yeah.
And he was using a lot of cocaine. These things got into him. He lost his job, and now he was in prison. So he went from a triple figure income to now he's in prison. I'm talking to him. We finally got rid of his voices. And I remember that when they left, they screamed as they left. And he was disoriented. He was sitting in the chair, he was disoriented. And he couldn't even stand up. and he looks and he said, "The silence is deafening." I'll never forget his words.
Yeah.
And he said, "The silence is deafening."
Yeah.
And he went for, maybe a month or two without them. And he started feeling lonely because they were his only friends.
Yeah.
He didn't have any real social skills. So they transferred me off that unit because they were suspicious of what I was doing.
Right.
They put me on a Spanish speaking, the chief psychologist, that jerk, put me on a Spanish unit where, I didn't speak Spanish very well, not well enough to do therapy.
Yes.
But whatever I was doing that he didn't understand what it was, he wanted it stopped.
Yeah, they're pushing you
So he
out.
switched me over there. So I came back and I checked on this guy maybe a month later after I'd left the unit. He was working with motor vehicle, taking in calls from, motor vehicle people. And I asked him, "Well, how you doing? The voice is still gone?" He goes, "No, I asked for him back. I got too lonely."
Wow. So you're now in private practice and you're getting success. So I've got a lot of audience members who have family members who are suffering from psychosis in various stages, and they're desperate for help. And I know you are run off your feet, but there is hope, right? There is hope for them.
Oh yeah.
And so you mentioned the MACE method. Is this a technique that you use with people?
Yeah. What MACE does? MACE is wonderful with trauma.
Right.
And virtually all mental illnesses come from trauma.
Yes.
They're so it's great at clearing the trauma. It doesn't work a lot of the times with from my experience, a straight in attack with MACE on the voice itself. It kind of bounces off it. That's what I've experienced. But what it does is it starves them to death. So that, once the patient realizes what they are, how they operate, and what he can do about it, you can arm him with the tools to fight back.
That's what we want.
They've got to fight back. Now, there's spiritual healers, and you can sometimes I can just get them out. I can shut them up long enough to get the information to these people so they can fight back. But I know there's spiritual healers out there that can actually just pluck them out.
Yeah. Well, the one I mentioned to you, soul center healing hypnosis, it's actually the person themselves has to agree to obviously being under hypnosis, and the hypnotherapist is facilitating you from, you're sort of in charge of helping to remove these things consciously as we go through each chakra point. And I need to get you in touch with Laura Whitworth, because she's, the way she's worked out that even if a pregnant mother has an entity attached to her sacral, which is in the belly, like in the belly button, the entity, it will usually be a difficult childbirth, and the entity, thinking that it's going to, the mother, the host, is going to die, jumps from the mother to the baby. So then the baby is born with these attachments, and quite often with birth trauma, it exacerbates it. So, there's things like this going on, and we can sort of identify different things. Like sometimes if you have one in the throat, a throat demon, they'll attach to the throat to control what's coming out, or bring anger to what you're saying, or to stifle your truth, especially if you're out there in public. They want to manipulate what you're getting. It's a whole sort of crazy parasitic world out there. And I know that sound frequency helps, prayer helps, like you said, but
they don't like Gregorian chants. They hate Gregorian chants.
Somebody asked me about that. Somebody asked me to ask you about Gregorian chants specifically. So
they especially the French ones. They really don't like the French Gregorian chants.
Could it be the frequency?
I think it's a frequency. Also, there's certain frequencies they can't stand either.
Yes.
528 hertz and 963 hertz.
Yeah, so I've got some tuning forks with 528 hertz. I've got to get you onto the tuning forks. And this one in particular,
you'll have to tell me where to get those things.
Yes, I will, and with Soma Energetics. And this one in particular is a very high frequency one. And during one of my sessions, I had these little, one of my entity release sessions, there was these little gremlins that were they come through because they come through the electricity, they come through the devices, they come through our Wi-Fi, they come through. This is what they do. They come through these devices. That's why they're always interfering with our things. But they come through headphones as well. And so I use this because they even said, this frequency clears the entities. So I'll talk to you about that off air. But the 528 hertz is a I think that's they call it the miracle frequency, or it's the DNA repair. So look, I think this is absolutely fabulous. I'm going to show everyone. Let's just double check your website again. So everybody can go jerrymarzinsky.com, and there is so much. There's a whole entire just a whole stack of information and resources here. I mean, just your section on the books, the types of recommended reading. I think there's a book that I'm going to recommend to you as well to add to this that somebody told me about yesterday.
Yeah, sure. That's a lot of this has all been done by Sherry Sweeney, my co-author.
Yes.
So we got together and we have to get this information out to the world.
You do. I think you've got a donation button for Sherry Sweeney as well. I think I remember reading. Yeah. Because is she retired now? I can't remember.
She's retired.
She's retired. There is. I don't know how heavy your consultations are now. Like how booked out you are. I'm sure you're very booked out.
I got a few weeks waiting time.
Yeah. You've also got can you see this? The YouTube channel thing? Does it show up on the screen? So this is Jerry's YouTube channel as well, Engineering Mental Sanity. All his interviews and also extra videos that Jerry sees as points of interest are here. Now this is interesting because I shared this video, this demonic entity seen in Vietnam through red night vision goggles. I shared this on my some of my chats because we were talking about the red light and how in Vietnam, they developed these red night vision goggles, and how the fighter pilots were seeing these tree people, weren't they? They were seeing the shadow people up in the trees when they were trying to fight them off in Vietnam. So they had to get rid of the red goggles. But I've shared that as well, so that's very interesting. Is there so everybody join Jerry's YouTube channel as well as his website. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Because we've been going for nearly 2 hours, and I do a lot of talking.
Well, yeah, there is hope. I mean, it's not a death sentence like psychiatry says, but those drugs do have their place. They calm the person down where we can reach them. Mace and some of these other energetic therapies should be used in the place of this constant drugging of these people.
Yes,
I mean they found that with long-term use, these drugs shrink the brain. They cause damage.
Yeah.
And what the voices do is they say, they tell the patient, look, you feel all these toxic effects. The psychiatrist is poisoning you.
Yes.
And in effect, he is. That's where all those attacks come from.
Yeah.
Because the patient himself can see that, these are symptoms of being poisoned.
Yes.
And the voice says, yeah, he is poisoning you, and he's making you take that, and bam, the psychiatrists are assaulted at a rate higher than virtually any other doctor.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah, absolutely.
And their suicide rate, the suicide rate of psychiatrists is virtually exactly the same as that of schizophrenics. 3 to 5 times higher than the general population. So if you're looking
in that environment, I mean, do you think that some of these psychiatrists have been affected by some of the? I mean,
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
You look at some of their egos; they're incredible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good ones, but boy, I tell you, they're an egotistical bunch.
Yes.
They don't want to be crossed. They want to be on the top of that roost.
Yes. Wow. Well, Jerry, I mean, this has been absolutely fabulous. And unless you've got something else to say, I mean, I could talk to you forever. I loved having you on. I know that you've got a lot of videos out there. You're trying to spread the word and get this out there, and it is becoming more mainstream and more accepted. And I'm so glad that you and Sherry Sweeney are doing this. And I want you to thank her for her work as well. And we can find you on jerrymarzinsky.com. Everybody share this video everywhere. Share it with your loved ones so that they can hear that, we've got some real credible witnesses and people who've worked in the industry for decades who are seeing that this is not as the drug companies are saying it is. So, Jerry, thank you so much. I hope you can come back on one day with somebody else.
Oh, I will. I have some interesting people who'd be willing to talk to you and come on with us.
Absolutely. I would love that. I would love to have you back on. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Okay. Thank you for having me. It's people like you that are making this happen. I mean, there's no way Sherry and I could do this by ourselves. This has got to come up from the bottom up, because there's no way it's going to break into the institutions and come down. It's got to come from the people up. They have to understand what's actually happening, because they're not going to get the truth from the psychiatric mafia or from big pharma. They're going to keep the people in the dark as long as they possibly can.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being the maverick that you are.
Well, thank you for having me.
No worries, Jerry. See you later, everybody. Links in the description below. See you later.